The Prohibition era lasted from 1920 to 1933. It was the proposed 18th Amendment that ended up failing. The main goal of Prohibition was to eliminate or reduce problems associated with alcohol consumption. Some of these problems included criminal activity, binge drinking, drunk violence, and deaths and injuries from alcohol poisoning. Although Prohibition ended up failing, the population did end up consuming less alcohol. Another goal of Prohibition was to eliminate the amount of drunkenness and violence and abuse it causes. Prohibition was also intended to get rid of saloons, where prostitution, gambling, and other illegal acts thrived. Supporters wanted to prevent absenteeism and on-the-job accidents that resulted from intoxication. Prohibition was a measure designed to reduce drinking by eliminating the businesses that manufactured, distributed, and sold alcoholic beverages. The goal of women who were at the forefront of this movement was to limit or ban alcohol consumption. The unpopularity of the Prohibition movement ended up actually increasing criminal activity.
Various organizations such as National Prohibition Party and Women's Christian Temperance Union believe that banning alcohol and alcohol consumption would decrease crime, spousal abuse, and increase religion in America. They believe drinking created discrimination due to the expensive price of hard liquor. Immigrants were in favor of the act so America could get back to its Anglo-Saxon roots. World War I also played a role because in 1916, an act was passed that banned alcohol in D.C., which made for greater prohibition reforms. There are also a number of brewing companies that were shut down. It also created patriotism and a time of anti-Germanism. Women also helped with the passing of this movement because they suffered abuse at home from their drunken husbands. They also believed the elimination would create a more civilized life. And thanks to the Treaty of Success of Women's Suffrage, they could finally place their opinions. The failures were that the movement instead created a black market for alcohol and made many Americans lose their jobs in the brewing industry. The economy also took a hit due to the loss of revenue from taxes. As opposed to lower crime, the prohibition increased by promoting the growth of organized crime and speakeasies.
A main figure during the Prohibition era was Nathan Doe. He was an American prohibition advocate who was also known as the Napoleon of temperance or the father of prohibition. Born into a strict Quaker household, he grew up believing that alcohol was to be the cause of many of society's problems, and for that reason, he wanted to ban it. He was a Republican. Many times, he was elected governor of Maine, and under his leadership, the Maine law was passed in 1851 that was the start of the Prohibition law. That led to the Rum Riot. Another leader of the Prohibition was Wayne Wheeler, who was an American attorney and longtime leader of the Anti-Saloon League. He was an advocate of the Prohibitionist movement and pushed for the 18th Amendment to get passed. Three main groups that pushed for the Prohibition were the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the Anti-Saloon League, that was once again led by Wayne Wheeler, and the Prohibition Party. Some fun facts about the Prohibition era was that it was the only amendment to the Constitution to have been repealed. Women were the main leaders of the movement, and drinking was not actually outlawed by the federal government, but the sale and transportation of it was.
President Wilson did not take a liking to this act because he had a personal wine cellar in the White House. Franklin D. Roosevelt got elected mostly for his repeal against the movement of prohibition. Utah was the state that technically ended prohibition, and you couldn't legally drink in Mississippi until 1966.
The penalty for each offense against the Prohibition could not legally exceed $10,000 or 5 years in prison. The Prohibition costed federal government a total of $11 billion in lost tax revenue.